One thing that doesn't change here in Cannes is the obsession with stardom, causing a stir even among the ultra-sophisticates of the French film world.
Hi, my name is Damon Wise. I'm here to talk about Jim Henson, Idea Man, with director Ron Howard and consultant Lisa Henson.
Hello.
So let's start with Ron. How did this movie come about?
Well, I've been directing documentaries for maybe about 10 years now. And through Imagine Entertainment, we have a documentary group, and we just got wind that maybe there was this possibility that the Henson family would be open to someone making a film about Jim. I immediately thought it was a great idea, but it was very important to have a conversation with the family, understand if there were limitations, what could be available to us, and so forth. And had this fantastic meeting at their studio in the classic Hollywood screening room, where I saw, so much footage that I had no idea existed about Jim's inner creative life, his family. Even his home movies were an expression of his creativity, but also tremendous affection. And I began to see this two-sided story of like somebody who outwardly we understand as this creative genius, but inwardly was both driven to be a great artist, but also be a great dad and be a great person. And it just came to life in that footage, and we had further conversations. And fortunately, the family, thought that they would trust me and us to make the film. I mean, it was a great opportunity.
Lisa, what persuaded you to trust Ron with the story?
Well, we wanted to see Jim, my father, as subject matter matched with a really great filmmaker. And, documentary that I loved so much was Marty Scorsese's documentary about George Harrison. And ever since that came out, I thought, is there a really wonderful director for whom my father would be a serious subject matter that they would want to delve into? And we were hoping for a tonal and personality match, which I don't think Ron would say it, but, we saw in Ron a lot of my father's optimism and joy and appreciation for others, and just immediately felt the trust that, we are producers, but we didn't want to produce the documentary. We wanted somebody to have an objective view, and for it not to be a Jim Henson Company production. It should be a filmmaker's film. And I'm so happy it made it here to Cannes so it can be seen as a film in its own right, because it's a wonderful film.
So obviously you mentioned you have all these, you have archive, you have personal testimony. Where did you start putting this film together? What was your narrative thread, so to speak?
Well, books, articles, kind of everything we could find, research team immediately diving in. But there was this couple of days of the initial interviews, which included the family, very insightful, very open, very much this kind of balance that I was looking for about sort of the human side, the cost in some ways of being so committed and so productive, and yet desperately, the goodness coming out clearly of trying to be a great dad. Frank Oz gave this tremendous interview, and it was funny, insightful, clear, with a kind of objectivity and yet, profound emotional connection and intellectual connection to sort of how it all happened. And it in the first couple of days of interviews, in a way, shaped the movie and changed it in a way. So it sort of stopped being highlights of great creative achievements, although all that stuff's in there. But it also became a story of discovery and experimentation and struggle and frustration, and with all the highs and lows. And it just immediately took on all these dimensions that kind of was everything that I was hoping for. But suddenly now we had people actually saying things that made me lean in. I felt like the audience would do the same.
So what kind of person was your father? Did he archive? Was there a lot of archive that he curated himself? I mean, what kind of materials did you make available to Ron?
We actually have a fairly good archive, but it was started by my mother. So my mother was his creative partner. They started the Muppets together, and her story has never been told. So Ron and his team have unearthed the entire story of my parents' relationship, as well as the partnership with Frank Oz. So I think Frank Oz and Jane Henson kind of flank my father as the subject matter. We have very extensive archives, but it's largely visual. So there were commercials, short films, drawings, unmade projects, all kinds of things that weren't really, it's not written archives so much. And I think a film is a perfect way to bring this all forward.
And Jim and Jane, neither one particularly liked being interviewed. So we found everything that we could of the two of them talking. And, your mom's story was the one that we just kept mining for because she was reluctant, participant in the spotlight, tremendously active creatively and important creatively. But that's one of the things that I'm so happy about is that slowly but surely you made a few more photographs were found and made available. And we were able to really tell Jane's story, which was, so it really is there's an important family story as well as this celebration and acknowledgement of all of these great achievements. So I guess what I'm saying is Jim expressed himself largely through those characters. And we found a few great interviews, and they're very, very helpful. Family, others who knew him, very, very helpful. But soon I think the audience begins to realize that you can learn a lot about Jim by watching him perform as well. And I think they begin to make that connection about 2/3 of the way through the movie. And I think it really is important.
Did you know him as a filmmaker?
I was very aware of him as a filmmaker. I didn't know him personally. I met him one time kind of in passing. But a very good friend of mine knew him well. George Lucas doesn't throw praise around very generously. And when I was talking to him about Jim saying I might get involved in this project, he just said, George doesn't say a lot, but he said, Jim Henson. Of course, I knew he loved him and missed him. And when Jim passed, George was devastated, and I witnessed that. But he said, Jim, he's a genius. That was it. The highest praise from George.
How did you just said there's not much material of Jim sort of on record. How did you approach that visually? How did you approach a film about a man with such a visual style and such a massive imagination?
Well, I really did want to infuse the movie with his sensibility and aesthetic and energy. And part of me tried to channel him. Like if he was trying to tell a story about himself, which he probably would never do, how would he go about it? Well, he did kind of tell stories about himself in these terrific experimental films. So we looked at those like Timepiece and others, in addition to the home movies, and sort of tried to adapt that into the documentary style surrounding the movie and the music in the movie. So, I think people feel like there's that spark and that energy married to a kind of an insight into the human condition and the experience that I think Jim was very plugged into.
Were you aware of the movie going on? Were you watching assemblies of the movie, or did you just wait till it was all finished? When did you finally see the finished movie?
It was almost finished. When we saw it was just about done. And honestly, I think for my family, even though we were all in the business, we wanted to have a step back from it and to see what this talented team would do. And we were so pleased because if people know anything about Jim Henson, they know he's a puppeteer. He did the Muppets. And immediately what comes through in the film is that he was also an animator, an artist, a filmmaker, and he was so overflowing with creativity. And I love the title of the movie, Idea Man, because he was just like outpouring ideas all the time. And people just wouldn't know that about him even if they're the biggest Muppet fans, they might not know that.
So it really is a story of a creative journey, outwardly what it means to us and what it has meant to us, that which we can celebrate, an acknowledgement of the struggle, and an acknowledgement of the sort of the equilibrium that he was trying to maintain as a really good person and a family man.